All right, welcome back to this episode of the Infield Edge. It's baseball season. It started most places. I mean, we're still lagging up here in the north, but it's officially kicked off. I know in the south, some of these youth leagues and other associations have been playing maybe for a month or so, maybe even longer now at this point. But we're into the season, and the thing about April's kind of the wettest month a groundskeeper has to deal with. Maybe sometimes that leaks into the first half of May before summer really sets in. But this is always a trying month for groundskeepers. And, the thing that makes it easier on you is having an infield that drains properly. And that requires maintaining your surface grade. And that is the most important job that a groundskeeper has to do. It's, your main job is to keep that surface grade so that water is running off the field. I mean, a lot of people make the mistake that they think that the water that falls on an infield skin should percolate through the soil to drain out off the infield, and that's incorrect. You can drain water much faster by running it off the surface. And as the season goes on, a lot of times your infield soil is going to get tighter and tighter, so it's going to have a hard time perking water. So you have to maintain that surface grade and make sure that you're getting water moving off that infield. If water sits on that infield, you're going to have problems getting those games in or dealing with localized wet spots, things like that. So this episode today is about dealing with the surface grade of your infield and how to deal with rain and drainage off of that infield skin. And we'll be starting that off here, talking about positive surface drainage with Steve Trosen. All right, so welcome back to the show, Steve. Actually, I should say welcome back. Welcome to the show, Steve Trosen from Home Field. Steve, you want to tell the audience what Home Field is?
So Home Field's a service entity of DuraEdge. So DuraEdge selling the product, we do the installs and we do infield and surface renovations, fixing modern-day problems on baseball and softball infields.
How many crews do you folks have?
We have 3 crews, one located in Michigan, one located in Grove City, Pennsylvania, and another located in Ogden, Utah. The Michigan operation primarily services Michigan, Northwest Ohio, and northeastern Indiana, whereas the Pennsylvania region primarily services that western Pennsylvania, western New York, into Ohio and West Virginia in itself. Ogden, Utah, they travel a little bit further. They have a wider region than the other crews. They're pretty strong in California and Utah, but they also do services in Idaho, Colorado, Texas, Arizona, many states that are requiring the needs of the service.
Not a lot of cities out there in that wide open expanse of the West.
No, you got
to get to the West Coast.
Yep.
Yeah. So what's your background? How did you get into ball field construction and renovation?
Well, actually, it's kind of a crazy story, or long story to say that, but I've been working in landscaping since I was about 14 years old. My dad and I had a small landscaping business that pretty much did small maintenance accounts, including like bed maintenance, planting of flowers, things like that, but also we had multiple lawn accounts doing lawn mowing and things like that. From there, when I graduated high school, my mom's side of the family, they owned a tree service. I didn't work with the tree service. I worked for the sister company that was right next door. They were a larger landscaping company, and after a few seasons with them, I transitioned into golf. I really enjoyed the golf aspect of it, which led me to further my education at Michigan State University, pursuing a degree in turfgrass management. And after graduating from college, I worked at a couple different private country clubs. And as my duties and responsibilities increased, I kind of started realizing that it took away from my enjoyment of actually playing the game of golf. And when that happened, it made me realize I needed a change. And once I was starting to explore other options within the industry, I got hooked up with Mike Robinson, who ran Home Field Turf and Athletic, which was a pretty much a sports field maintenance company here in Michigan. We did a lot of game preps for some baseball and softball fields at high schools and things like that. But we also did installs and renovations for DurEdge. And then in 2017, Grant and Mike Robinson, they had some conversations. DurEdge ended up taking over and implementing a service entity for themselves. Once that was all worked out, I followed along with it and was brought over to the DurEdge side of things.
So, did you lose your zest for golf, or did you maintain it because you got out of it then?
I maintained it because I got out of it. I play quite a bit.
You just
now.
don't have any time to play it, probably, is the problem now.
Yeah, finding the time to play. But, I mean, it's better standing on the tee box now and just looking down the fairway and not looking off to the left, be like, oh, I got to fix that tomorrow. And all that good stuff.
Well, it's springtime. It's the wettest time of the year for people who are trying to maintain ball fields. What is it that you commonly see when you go out to fields to work on and as far as poor grade and low spots and that kind of stuff?
Yeah, I mean, this time of year, especially with the amount of moisture we have retained within the surfaces themselves,
right,
it's a really good time to identify problems that might pester you throughout the season and going forward.
Yeah. So, I talked about it just briefly at the beginning of the introduction before you came on, but positive surface drainage. Can you explain to our listeners what that means?
So essentially, I mean, positive surface drainage is we're matching the infield to move water uniformly that is promoted by the existing topography of where the field stands. So what we want to do is we want to get as much of the surface area of the infield skin to react as uniformly as possible and allow water movement to get in drainage to get off the field itself. So we're not seeing standing water areas, pooling areas, and then just areas in itself that are retaining more moisture than we should.
Yeah. I was telling the people at the beginning that managing your surface grade is probably one of the most important things a person who takes care of a ball field has to do. There's growing grass and cutting grass and things like that, but most of your time is spent maintaining a ball field on the infield skin, and maintaining that surface grade, a consistent surface grade across it, is probably your most important job, because if you keep that in good shape, your life's easy. And taking care of the field is easy. But if you've got low spots and you've got lips and those kind of problems where it's damming up the water and not allowing it to move, you've got a mess. So one of the questions you'll frequently get, I'm sure, as I do, is what's an appropriate slope to have on an infield?
I mean, that ranges from what level of play that you're at. Obviously,
Yeah.
The higher levels we get, we want to see it being more flat. But, I mean, with saying that, at the higher levels, they have more money into their maintenance budget and just more resources to maintain the field in itself. What I like to see at the recreation high school level, our smaller colleges and things like that, is, I mean, we want to be at about a 0.5%. 0.5% is going to allow adequate surface drainage, allowing water to move fast enough after, our heavy rain events and things like that. But it's also going to be a more sustainable grade where we're not moving water too quickly, that we're seeing erosion and runoff as much.
Would you call a 0.5% the minimum for that?
Hey, I mean, if we were installing a new field from the ground up and we were putting it on a conical grade, a conical grade is going to allow the whole infield surface to be uniform and react the same. Mm-hmm. I would be looking at installing a 0.5% grade from the beginning at the park and recreation and high school level.
And for those at the lower levels who don't understand, a conical grade is where the entire infield is kind of shaped in a cone. So the base of the mound typically is your highest point, and everything sheds off in all directions around that. But there are other ways to drain an infield. Not every field can be cone graded. especially at the park and rec level, because fields and park and rec levels are okay. We're going to stick a field here. They don't really care what the how the elevations change across that field. In a lot of cases, you're probably sheet flowing that field, I would assume, correct?
Yeah. So what else we would have would be the dual slope, which I assume that's what you're talking about
Yep.
with the sheet flowing.
Yeah.
And like you mentioned on Paul, a lot of fields that I work on, especially at high school and parks and recreation level, I mean, around here in Michigan, they were built in the 50s, 60s, 70s, and essentially they had a plot of land, and that was the availability to put a baseball field on. And I mean, that's as far as the thought process went into it.
Yeah, they literally cut out the infield, and there you go. They didn't even think about surface grade or anything.
Yep, exactly. So, I mean, a lot of what we do at this level, and especially, in these areas that already have a lot of established playing surfaces that are being renovated and worked on, is we're using what the lay of the land gives us, right?
Yeah.
So we're finding positive surface drainage off of the existing topography of the land, of the surrounds where the ball field is currently located.
Have you ever come across a field where it's been impossible to achieve positive surface drainage?
It does happen quite often with, I mean, in that scenario, we're looking at, the existing topography of the land is just flat in itself, and that's where we see the most issues, is because we can't move the water off. But in those situations, as we've spoke before, we do full tarp renovations where, like, say it was a baseball infield that had existing infield grass. We could look at removing the existing infield grass, raising that up to achieve the positive surface drainage that we're looking for.
Yeah. And not only is the surface grade, that's certainly one key component to having success in dealing with rain. The other is obviously the soil makeup. That's also a major factor. As you talked about, if you have too much of a slope, depending on what you have for a soil on your infield, if you're high in silt or high in fine sand or both, you're going to see a lot of migration of those materials off an infield in a heavy rain situation. What do you figure is the most cost effective if they've got a soil issue and they've got a grade issue, but they can't afford to change both things at the same time if they were to bring you in to work on it? Which to you is the bigger key to start with, surface grade or fix this soil first?
I mean, for me, it's obviously going to be fixing the surface grade of the field.
I would agree.
Because, I mean, it doesn't matter what type of material you have on the field, what type of soil makeup that we do have. If we're not allowing water to freely move off the field, no material is going to perform into the conditions that it should. So fixing surface grade is obviously the first and foremost what we should be doing to look at creating more sustainable playing fields.
I mean, ideally, folks, if you can do both at the same time, it's going to be the cheapest route. If you can only do one, surface grade is the first one to take care of. But if you still have problems with soils washing off of that field after that grade has been corrected, you are going to have to go in and eventually and upgrade those soils so that they stay in place. And that just means remobilizing, a crew to come back out there again. And they're basically going to do the same thing. They're going to have to grade it and till it up. So if you can knock it out and do both things at once, you're going to save money in the long haul versus having them come and do one operation and then coming back and doing another one again. Why don't you explain the process for correcting a surface grade, the surface drainage on a ball field? I'm sure it's kind of different between a totally skinned infield versus a grassed infield.
Yeah, I mean, they're different, but at the same time, they're quite similar. So what we're going to do is we'll come out with our laser and we'll get existing topography shots. And what we're trying to do is identify what the existing lay of the land is giving us, right? So a lot of our lip issues and things like that, they aren't part of the existing topography, right?
Right.
They weren't there. They were created by how the field was draining before. So we want to get down to the base of how the field was before the infield was installed, figure out that grade, and then within that we will go through, remark everything out to encompass having all the lip removals and things like that come out of it. We'll mark it out, remove the lips, get the field back square and laid out how it should, and then from there we figure out the grades with those existing topography shots that we just took, and we'll use our automated grading tools, which is very crucial into achieving positive surface drainage. Is being able to have this automated laser guided equipment, and from there we'll re-level the fields that now have the new grades promoting the surface drainage that we need.
Yeah. Timing wise, he probably takes. On an easy field with no lips to take out, you're probably talking day and a half job most. Without lips.
A lot of our jobs. Even from if we were coming in to just remove some lips and regrade the surface, assuming that we had enough material on the surface to achieve the positive surface drainage we're looking for, that's about a day. Okay. And then if we were going to do the same thing and we were going to remove 2 inches or so of the existing infield material that was on the field and replace it with a new material, we're right about in the 3-day range on that. Yeah. A majority of our projects fall between the 3 to 5 day range. But obviously the more extensive it goes, if we're removing full infield grass outside the hips, if to remove those lips, we have to remove 10 feet of the arc or something like that and resod, obviously that's going to add more labor days to the project itself.
And even still, that kind of a time frame, if your average install is say 2 to 5 days, that's pretty fast to knock that kind of work out. It's pretty amazing what you do. We've been showing some videos here of some of the work you guys do. It's pretty amazing to watch these guys do their job. And, so often we hear customers say that they plan to renovate it themselves, or they've got, Johnny down the street's got a Bobcat and he's going to do it for us. He's going to fix our infield and regrade it, or he's going to, put the amendment of our soils in to fix our soils. What do you tell an organization like that when they're making that kind of a choice?
I like you said, we were talking earlier, and we have hours and upon hours of footage of us doing it. So what I like to tell people, especially if it's in the beginning stages when we're first having our conversations, is there's always going to be a guy in town or a local landscaping company that does say they can come in there, do what we're going to do, and fix the field's issues. But the difference between us and them is they could have been working on a retaining wall the day before. The day before, we were working on a baseball field. And although it seems pretty cut and dry what we're doing, there is a science to it. And knowing the science of completing the install and providing the solution is the biggest aspect. And, whether it's home field itself or numerous of our authorized installers around the nation, we got the science down, and we know the things we're looking for, and we know from point A to point B of how to fix them.
Yeah, and I'm sure you have, but I've seen everything in the book. I've seen asphalt companies go in and build ball fields, and fence contractors, and all these kind of people who really don't typically work on a ball field, and it's just grading. Yeah, well, it is just grading, but it's doing it right and knowing what you're doing, and especially if you're going to be blending in some new soils and things like that. My answer to a lot of these people is, look, you know what? You only get the money once. So you better do it right the first time, because if you screw it up, if this guy who's going to volunteer to do it because he's in the league, or he's going to give you a sweet deal because he lives in town, even though he doesn't do this for a living, he's a grader. What's going to happen if he screws it up? Are you going to have money to get it corrected again? So as I always say, you only get the money once. Make sure you do it right the first time. How does a organization go out and find a quality contractor to perform a renovation on their field? How should they qualify that contractor?
I mean, honestly, I would have to think about that question in itself. But I mean, a lot of what we see is our new clients are pretty much word of mouth clients, right? So if we are a company that's going to come do the work, before you call said company, they should already have the reputation for the work that you're asking to be performed. Yeah. That's what if we break it down to high schools, if we're looking at, we do one field within a league, away team comes, plays at the new field we just did, it seems a lot more times than not, you're receiving a call from the other coach or the other AD.
Sure.
We just played at so-and-so high school and we need our field the same way they have theirs. But the reputation, the marketing of the company that's performing the installs and performing the work, I mean, that should be very well looked into before making your decision on who's coming in and doing the install of the field itself.
Okay. So, I'm an organization. I've had you come in, re-level my field, get the proper slope on it. Maybe I had you blend some Dur-Edge into my infield to adjust the makeup of the soil so it's working properly for them. How long should that last before it's going to need to be tweaked again?
So right now we're recommending that fields should be graded at minimum every 3 years after install. But obviously, I mean, the more maintenance that you give to your field, the more playable, the more sustainable it's going to be for a longer period of time. Even at like our high school levels and even some parks and recreations that see like higher volume and things like that, we're going back yearly to do these grades. And I mean, getting back on them, remixing up the top surface and reestablishing that grade from the initial install grade is crucial into cutting down on, forming lips and material migration and just overall sustainability of the field itself. Yeah. At recommendation, we shouldn't be going more than 3 years without having a laser grading process performed on the field after it's first done. But if you could have it done every year, I mean, it would only promote better results on your field itself.
Yeah, and in doing so, you ensure that going into each season, you've got an excellent surface grade. You're working to cut down the number of days that field is going to be unavailable for play after a rain event, after a major rain event, because it will have drained more efficiently. So it's typically going to get back into queue as far as being able to play down again. So, in the long haul, it might be a touch more expensive than, say, going in every 3 years, because obviously the amount of damage you're going to see of that field after 1 year versus 3 years is going to be totally different, right?
Yeah.
You're going to have more work to do in 3 years than if you're doing it every year. And if you're doing it every year, I guarantee you're there for less than a day.
Yeah. You're adding a smaller amount of infield material to achieve finished grade, and it's a much easier process on the company doing the install, but also on the end user who's maintaining the field.
That's another thing you hear a lot is Park and Recs will go, well, yeah, we add a truckload of infield material to our infield every year. For the Dur-Edge product, if you're recommending that you come back every 3 years to regrade that field, what are you seeing as an average? How much on a Dur-Edge field, how much do you typically have to add in over a 3 year period when you come back to regrade? Is it a truckload? Is it a half a truckload? Is it 5 tons? What do you see on average?
I mean, that question pretty much boils down to of how many events, how many games are we having on that field? Mm-hmm. And obviously nowadays, full practices are essentially the equivalent use of what a game is. I would say we're looking at about 22 to 25 tons. And that's just because we're going to see migration of material in itself over time, and we're losing material just through play in itself as well.
Yeah.
But
Okay.
yeah, I would say, I mean, a good average is about 22 to 25.
Well, Steve, I appreciate you stopping by today and fill us in on a little bit about keeping the surface grade on your field correct so that your field's draining great. And I hope you have hopefully the weather turns around for you here in the next couple of weeks and you can be out more regularly on the fields working, get away from this wet season, and hope you have a great year.
Yep. Thanks, Paul. Thanks for having me on.
Thank you. All right, welcome back to the show, little Tommy Burns. How you doing, Tommy, for our North-South episode?
Doing all right, Paul.
Your mom said you could come out and play today, so we're going to talk to you a little bit about, what's going on here in April. I mean, I don't care if you're in the north or the south. This time of year, you're still dealing with a lot of rain. It's probably one of the most challenging months for people who have to maintain ball fields to try and keep them playable all the time. And we just got done talking to Steve Trosen from Home Field, talking about surface grades on the infield and things like that, and making sure water is running off properly. But let's face it, most recreational fields don't have that luxury. They're typically going to have a lot of low spots and that kind of thing, and which kind of brings to a point that, again, we see no matter which end of the country we're on, the use of drying agents. And there's a right way and there's a wrong way to use it. And Tommy, since you're older than I am, I'm going to defer to you and let you talk a little bit about, what you see and what are the proper ways to take care of these kind of things. You got a puddle in and out in an infield skin. Well, how do you take care of it?
Yeah, Paul, that's a big problem, and a lot of people don't know the correct procedure. One of the things I always tell them, and I'm sure Steve covered it, the best way to avoid puddles is having a consistent grade. Watch your low spots. Watch the lip, especially around the back edge of the infield, because ideally your skinned area should drain from the front of the infield towards the back. So that's a big thing. I think another big thing that I've always told people is after a rain event, get the standing water off your field as soon as possible. Don't let it sit there for a couple days. Puddle pillows, pumps, anything that you can soak up. We don't want to sweep out a hole. We don't want to use a hose to drag the water. Number one, if you try to sweep it out, you're going to make the hole deeper. Number two, if you're sweeping it out, you're going to get an area adjacent to your puddle even wetter. So what we want to try to do is try to get that standing water off the field before we even start using a drying agent. I like to put the drying agent, I see some people use a 5-gallon bucket and just chicken feed it out. That's a good way to do it. See people using a scoop shovel and fan it out. I like to see that. The one thing we don't want to see people dumping it. And I've always told people, if you want to dump it into a puddle and you want to use 12 pallets, to do your field, I'll sell you all you want. But there's a correct way to do it. If it's used correctly with the right product, you don't have to take it off the field. If you're using the real fine, floury kind of particles, I would try to take those off the field. What they'll do is they'll seal off your skinned area, and it'll create the problem where beneficial water cannot penetrate into your infield skin. So the correct way, get the standing water off, dust it off with your drying agent, and take a rake and use a technique. And I'm not sure if you've talked about this yet in your episode, Paul, but back raking. So back raking is kind of counterintuitive when you talk about it because it actually involves taking the rake and pushing it forward. Anytime you take a rake and you pull it back to yourself, you're going to end up going a little bit too deep. You're going to end up getting dirt clods. When you take that rake and just push it in front of you, and just groove that area. Let that drying agent do its work. If the puddle's not too bad, you may try back raking it before you put the drying agent on it. It's going to expose more surface area and help the wind and the sunshine, hopefully, that you've got to dry that field out. Let it sit for a while, let it do its work, and then go and test it with your foot. If it's solid, go ahead, rake the area, drag it, and you're good. If it's still a little bit soft and you slip a little bit, go 90 degrees, back rake it again. 90 degrees from your first cut, dust it with a little more drying agent, go work on another area, and then come back to it. That's probably the best way I've seen to use it.
I'm gonna add something a little different to that, and that is the type of drying agent. A common mistake I have seen over my decades of taking care of ball fields is, in talking to other people, is sometimes they run out of what they might be using for a drying agent, typically a calcined clay product, and it's a weekend or whatever, and they can't get to their normal suppliers, so they'll go, well, we'll just go out and get some oil dry or some cat litter. It's got to be the same thing. It looks exactly the same. Well, folks, there is a big difference between oil dry, cat litter, and the drying agents that we use on ball fields. They are all made typically out of the same clay product that is manufactured for our drying agents. The difference is in how hot they are fired. Cat litters are going to be fired typically around 500 degrees, basically enough to super dry that clay colloid and allow it to suck up the urine from the cats. But it's also made so that it becomes a mush or forms a cake, kind of disintegrates and forms a cake when it dries. So you can scoop it up out of a cat litter box. We don't want that on a ball field. That's pretty nasty. Oil dries are baked a little bit hotter than that for sucking up oil off of shop floors and things like that. I'm not sure what the temperatures are.
They're typically about 900.
900 degrees. Okay, thank you, Tommy. Whereas our calcined clays for ball fields are baked anywhere, depending on the brand that you buy, from about 1100 degrees to about 1300, 1350 is what Duredge burns theirs to. The hotter you burn it, of course, the stronger that particle is and resists breakdown. It's going to break down, but the harder you bake it, the longer it's going to take to break that product down. And that's really, when you look at all of the calcined clays out on the market, they're all made of the same clay. They all come out of one of three mines within a very small region down in southwest Tennessee, northern Mississippi. They're all used Mount Merlinite clay. The difference is gradation. There are gradation ranges on those products, and then also the heating of the products. The hotter they're heated, the more resistant they are to breakdown, and the longer they'll last on your ball field. So, in that situation, my suggestion is shop for quality, don't shop for price.
Yeah,
Paul,
go ahead.
I will finish up and say, bottom line is, don't use cat litter, don't use oil dry on your ball fields.
Yeah, so to expand on that a little bit, once you get it up to 12 to 1400 degrees, let's say, somewhere in there, that clay keeps its shape wet or dry. The softer brands for oil absorbents, for cat litters, revert kind of back to, maybe not back to their natural state, but they don't stay that hard. They don't keep their integrity of that particle. Yeah. And that's what tends to break it down more.
Yeah, that's what the definition of calcine is. It's taking a particle and making the physical characteristics stable, so no matter whether it's wet or dry, it retains that same shape.
Yeah. So they don't melt on you.
So just a quick lesson on using drying agents, folks. Don't dump a whole bag in a puddle. Get rid of the excess water first, then apply your drying agent. And it's always better to put a little on. You can always put a little more on. Just don't
Yeah.
go overboard with it. Save yourself some money and just take your time and allow Mother Nature to do her thing as well. And just buy good quality product, and I think it'll help you out a long ways along. So
Another
anything
good
else to add, Tom?
well, another good tip for people is everybody's got a cell phone camera. The next time you get a good rain on your field, take a picture of your field. You've got a road map of all the low spots. So when you're out there dragging your infield, and I always ask people, what are you thinking about when you're dragging your infield? And everybody, a lot of times they just like get this glassy-eyed look. And what you're trying to do, you're trying to maintain your surface grade. Ideally, when your field was built, you had the positive drainage. That's what we're trying to do. We're trying to maintain it. So when you get a big rain, take a picture of it. That way you know what spots you have to address so you can minimize puddle formation in the future. So that's always a good little tip to people.
Yeah. And stay tuned for the maintenance tip coming up right after this, because we're going to talk about using string lines to see exactly where your low spots are, and then using a level board as to how to fix them. So that's coming up next in our maintenance tip. All right, Tom, thank you very much for this edition of North South.
Thank you, Paul.
And we'll be back next time.
Okay, thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
You bet.
Generally speaking, March, April, and May are the wettest months during the baseball and softball seasons here in the U.S. And to ensure your infield recuperates quickly from a rain event, we need to keep a close eye on the surface grade of the infield skin to make sure that the rainwater can drain off uninhibited. That means no high spots like lips that can dam the water, and no lower areas where water can sit and soften up the infield skin base soil. The water needs to consistently be moving off that surface. So let's show you how to check for these issues on your ball field, starting with monitoring your lips. Now I'm on the downhill side of the infield skin, so water drains in this direction towards the shallow part of the outfield. When water drains this way in a really heavy rainstorm, it's going to bring some of this material with it, typically, and you're going to see some of that get flushed into along this grass edge here, which forms a lip. Other things that can cause that to happen, of course, is getting a little away from yourself when it comes to dragging and throwing material into the grass lip. All these things work to build up this lip. And the way to check to see if you have an existing lip is to take a level like this and put it down here and check and see if you're going to get any kind of a teeter-totter effect. If you had a lip in there, it might do this kind of thing. Or it might stick up like this, or whatever the case may be. Here, in this case on this field, you see we've got a nice clean transition between the dirt and the grass. There's no tripping hazard here, and most importantly, there's no dam effect here that's going to stop the water from moving off this infield down into the outfield grass where we want it to continuously move off the playing surface. Now, here's a corner of that infield, and you're looking at the foul line there, and it's giving you an indication that there is a situation where the grade is not consistent from the dirt into the grass. You can see there's a little hump there on that foul line, and that's a pretty good indicator that you've got a grade issue right at that point. And if we take our level and do the same thing that we did before, you can see by the way that that's sticking up on the left side that we indeed have a grade situation where we don't have a consistently smooth transition. This is going to prohibit the water from draining off easily onto the grass area. So this would be a case of this portion of the back part of the infield where the grade needs to be corrected. That lip being taken out, you cut out the sod, drop that elevation down where the grass is, put the sod back so that you've got a nice, convenient, and consistent grade along that back edge. All right, now in checking the infield lip edges to see how they are performing, we set up a level up just like we did on the back side. We're going to check for any kind of hills or you know, teeter-tottering of that level if we've got any kind of a lip. And sitting it down here, you can see this is the infield grass, this is the infield skin. Water is supposed to be moving this way. This should be a smooth transition between the grass and the infield dirt, and you can see we don't really have any rocking of the slope, or of the level rather. And actually, if I look at the bubble, it's showing just a very slight slope in that direction, which is what we want it to be. We want the water to move continuously across this surface, unimpeded by lips that are formed on the back or the front of the infield skin. So this is great. I've checked most of the edges along this infield. They look pretty good. The only issues are right in the corners on the outfield edge. So we can now, knowing that, we can check this with string lines, running a string line across our infield skin to see where we might have high spots, that slow water movement across that infield skin, or act as a dam, or low spots where water might sit and soften those areas. We want a consistent surface all the way across. So let's check that out next. Okay, we've set up our string line. The pin is 6 inches in on the front end of the infield. We're going to tie the string off here on the back side. And I'm using here a solid cord cotton. Some people call it clothesline cord, but it's got really good stretch to it. And the key to checking these grades is making sure that you get this string as tight as possible without breaking it. The tighter the string, the more accurate the read. If this is just loose on here, obviously that string's going to sag and not give you a good reading. So we want to make sure we get this good and tight on the pin. Tie this off and really get this to give us a good read. Then we want to make sure that this string here is down to the ground. We just tap that pin in, and we use this grass edge here as your reference point for the grade. We're going to do the same thing on the front, up there. All right, again, on the front edge here, we want this string touching this grass edge because that's our reference point. So we push this down till it's nice and tight. Now, we're going to use the sun and the string line to check our surface grade. All right, now with our string line set up, you can see how easy this solid braid corded string is. A little bit easier to see than some of the strings I've seen other groundskeepers use. And you need that visibility, and you need that thick of a cord, because what we rely on is the sun to drop shadows off that string line so you can see where you're high and you're low. So if we pull back here, and I get back into the middle of this infield, you can see that we don't see any shadow for the most part. It's pretty tight to the ground, indicating that it's either at grade or slightly above grade. And as I go along this string line and I get down to the back portion of it here, as we approach the back side of the infield, here you can see the nice drop of a shadow of a low area towards the back of the infield. Now this is also right where the second baseman, just to the left of where the second baseman plays. So naturally it would typically be a little low, but you see how that shadow drops in there. This is why you always want to do this on a sunny day. Very hard to do on a cloudy day. You have to be a real expert at this, and if you do this enough, like we used to do back in the old days when I was groundskeeping in Major League Baseball, you know, we could do that. But it takes a lot of experience to read it on a cloudy day. So you want to take advantage of the sun and do it on a sunny day. Those shadows just make it very simple. But you see here, we're back on the infield, right towards the where the second baseman would normally place himself for the play, and we've got that low area. Now, that may not be as low as we think it is, because if this is high here in the center, which I believe it is, you can see a crown if you step back, As you see, it drops in the front there just a little bit. It's a little low in the runner's lane, but again, that might be being lifted up because it's a little high in the center here. So if I was to come in here and try and grade this down, if this is a localized area on an infield where I've got a low area that's holding water down on the back end, I might check and see if this is high in the middle. If it is, what you do first is you come in and you scrape this down along this string line and pull it back to where it's low back there, and pull a little bit of it back up to where it's low up in the front there. You cut down the high area, you fill the low area, and that's how you check it. Now, you know, obviously if your whole infield was this bad, well, even though this isn't really that bad of an infield, but if your whole infield is askew, you know, you're probably going to bring somebody in to laser grade it. But doing it by hand, you can do, you know, areas that might be really bad that are holding water. And typically those are going to be usually in the back because you've got lips along there that it's a dam. Well, we don't have that issue here. So it's strictly going to be grade, okay? That lower area back there where the second baseman's playing is definitely going to be a place where it could hold water. So we want to make sure we try and address that. Either putting in more material in there, or better yet, first adjusting this grade, making sure we get this little bit of a hump out of this area here in the center, and taking care of this little bit of a low area in the runner's lane here. When working with a totally skinned infield, you're going to set a center pin right behind the pitching rubber of the farthest pitching rubber away from home plate. Then from there you'll run a string line out to the back arc of the infield, and you'll just take that string line and pivot it around all the way around that circle like hands on a clock in order to check the surface grade all the way around that infield. So how would I address this? If I know I've got this high area in the middle, a little bit low up front and more low down the back, I would come out here and nail drag this entire portion of this infield here, deeply nail drag it, put my string line back in place, and use a rake, or better yet a level board, and pull from the high areas, the known high areas, and feather it out into the low areas, okay? I'd pull a little bit up here to take care of this little bit of low area here, pull the rest of this down towards the back side to backfill it back in here. Most of the soil that's out here, you know, if it gets low, it's still on this infield somewhere, okay? How do I know that? Because I don't have any lips along the back edge there. So we know that that soil wasn't getting deposited in the lips, so it's been remanipulated out into the center here somehow by dragging or some other purpose of what they were working with on this infield that caused that soil to work into the middle, possibly. Or maybe it was left that way when it was graded in the first place. Either way, we know that we've probably got a slight high area along here, and actually in checking the rest of the infield I found the same thing in most areas. It was high in the middle and low on the back end, and a little bit up on the front end in the runner's area. So this is an easily fixed process. Use the string lines to identify troubled areas or identify the problem, and then from there you can create a plan to loosen the material and manipulate it to get it where you need it to go. The prime goal of a groundskeeper is to keep this surface grade so that water is moving across and draining it. We never want to drain an infield by having water go through the infield dirt. It's too slow, and in order to get water to go through the dirt, you'd have to have this infield material a little looser, and that's not conducive to play or maintenance of this infield. So we want a firm infield, and then we want a good surface grade. So if you do what we looked at today, making sure that your lips are in check and you don't have a buildup along the lips, and you keep that surface grade correct, using these tools that we did to check the grade and addressing those problems, you should be successful in keeping your infield well drained and recuperating after a rain fairly quickly.
That's a wrap for this episode of The Inside Edge, brought to you by DuraEdge. Whether you're maintaining a local recreational ball field or something bigger, we're here to help you on your journey to create safer, easier to maintain, and more playable ball fields. If you have any questions or topics you'd like us to cover, leave a comment or email us at insideedge@duraedge.com. Be sure to follow @DurEdge Products on social media for more tips and insights. We'll see you on the next episode.